Hello everyone, this is Backlog Crew. So today we're going to be talking about War for the Overworld. Let me go ahead and introduce the other members of the Backlog Crew today. So we have Kurt,
Hello.
and then we have Ryder. Alright, so all three of us have played through 7 chapters of War for the Overworld, and we're going to be going into our different factors of the game that we've enjoyed. Some parts maybe we didn't enjoy so much. We're just going to be going over this game, and so let's go ahead and get started. So War for the Overworld was created and introduced in April of 2015. It was released April 2nd actually, and then it was created by Brightrock Games. And so for War for the Overworld, we start this campaign, and Mendicause is the name of the person that wakes us up from it doesn't quite explain, but he introduces us that this is our realm, and this is going to be the source of our power, and it's going to be our anchor to reality. So he and a few other underlords are planning to take over the realm of Kairos and its empire. So we must try and take down the king, Lucius, his generals, and then stop the goddess Kira from interfering with our plans. So, just right off from the beginning, guys, what did you think? And I'll let anyone take that one.
So, just jumping off all that lore, you just don't.
Just threw all of
The
that
lore
at you.
is, yeah. So the lore is cool, but the game kind of does the exact same thing, where there's just a 2-minute cutscene where they tell you what's happening, but it's so many fantasy words that are just made up and concepts that are just made up that it's immediately overwhelming. And then eventually, I'm just in the first level building dungeons, and I'm like, what am I do? Who am I the Underlord? Am I working for the Underlord? Are you the Underlord, Mr. Narrator? Like it was confusing. But as far as like gameplay goes, this is really my first RTS that I put any amount of time into. I played a little bit of Civ 5, but didn't even finish like a game.
It's
And then
turn-based.
oh, is that not okay? See, I don't know.
Mm-mm.
So, well, I
Get
looked this
out of
one up. The
here.
close, then the closest thing I've played to an RTS is Pikmin, which I know is a contentious assertion, but I've heard it's arguably considered an RTS. So I went into this with like no idea really what was going to be happening. I understand the idea of one, but it's been a very new experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, okay. Ryder?
Um, so I kind of had the opposite reaction of Kurt. I was like, just immediately like, yes. And I didn't really know anything about it, and I just kind of accepted it like at face value. And like the words, I'm not gonna say they really like sunk in. Like I just understood them immediately, but it wasn't just kind of like spitballing and just hoping it sticks either. I just kind of accepted for what it was. I was like, okay, uh, I'm bad guy, but bad guy is good guy here, and bad guy going to take over good guys who are bad guys. Let's do
Exactly.
this.
See, why would you think that's confusing?
Exactly.
It's not
So
the
easy.
premise that's confusing, but I
It's
still don't know
all of
who the
that.
Underlord is. Am I the Underlord?
Okay, so
Yes.
yes, you are the
Okay.
underlords. So each of the underlords that you meet, well, that's not going to make much sense, but each of the other beings like you that you meet are also underlords. It's
Okay.
never explained what Mendicaus is at this point. Will that be introduced in the future? I'm not quite sure, honestly, because I've never
The
completed this
narrator.
game either. Yes, but he's
Okay.
given yes. So it's determined that his name is Mendicaus. I think it's only mentioned 2 times that I recall. So the
Okay,
very
great.
first scene, it had subtitles that said Mendicaus, and then another mission I will bring up later. His name is also mentioned, but other than that, it's never given like any background upon the narrator, other than he knows a lot about underlords and the history of
Yeah,
it.
Gotcha.
I think the reason why I didn't get hung up on anything, whereas like you did, Kurt, is that I've played RTS games before, and like the Total War games does this exact same thing, and you just kind of learn to accept that whenever you start a game like this, you're gonna have a narrator who maybe he's named, maybe he's not named, or she, he, whatever it is, and they're really just your supervisor, and they're gonna walk you through the basics through tutorials, and the rest doesn't matter too much. Um, and so like I just kind of accepted like, oh, this is like the old man from Total War, Medieval 2 or whatever. And so I just kind of zoned that out and just took the bigger pieces and ran with that.
Right. So in other popular RTSs such as StarCraft or Warcraft, you actually had advisors for the clans or the factions that you were with, and they would do all this explanation for you and battle breakdowns and tips and tricks and stuff during the combats. However, Mendikaus is going to be that advisor at this time, but like we said, what is Mendikaus? It may be explained, it may not, but each of those RTSs like that do kind of throw that at you just so they can be your Professor Oak to tell you not to use that item at this time.
Yeah, and I think that's a cool system. Like the narration, it's helpful, it's charming. It's kind of the only thing audibly going on besides like background music and like sound effects and things like that. So I mean, it's nice that it's there.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I was actually the Underlord or if I was the architect that I was working for. I get that now. Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with like the character. I think it's an interesting concept, just having someone like coaching you, and it's not just here's how to play the game, but it's someone who's actually helping you, the character, understand what your role is in this world.
And he's not afraid to yell at you and complain to you to pay your workers or let you know that they're not happy and they're going to go on strike. So,
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get too deep into like the mechanics just yet, but I have some thoughts about when he
Okay.
won't stop talking about that kind of thing. You want me to just go? Okay.
we can cover that
So-
in chapter 1 if you want. If you want to introduce chapter 1, or I can, and then
No,
that's
I will let you introduce, and then I'll go off. Unless Ryder wants to say something. Oh, okay.
He said, no.
Go ahead.
You got this. Okay. So, chapter 1, this is going to be our intro to being an Underlord. And so, we're going to be taken to our realm to kind of get an idea of what it's like to be an Underlord, get our feet back in the pool here because Mendikaus actually tells us that we were an Underlord before, but we had been banished from the realm, and now we're finally back. And so we have to get our strength back and learn our different mechanics of being an Underlord and just really understand the mechanics of the game as well. And so that leads us to chapter 1, where we are opened up to our dungeon core, and we get our first experience into this RTS and the building mechanics. So I will let Kurt go ahead with what he wanted to talk about. So he wants to cover some mechanics.
Okay, so I think this game throws a whole lot at you and doesn't give you much time to process it. I think part of that is it's an RTS. So if a big text box pops up and it's like, here's how this works, everything around you is still going on. And so you better consume that information fast, which isn't a big deal like in the tutorial, but they introduce new things like every chapter. And so by the time it's like, hey, prepare your battlements, you're going to be invaded soon and you better like have your defenses ready. It's hard when they're like, by the way, these are what defenses are. And you have to like understand all of that while you're also supposed to be preparing. And I don't know of a way to pause it. I guess if you could pause it, it wouldn't be real time. And I also want to say that I don't know that things are explained particularly. I'm complaining about two kind of competing things because on one hand, they throw a lot of information at you and you have to like take the time to consume that even though everything else is happening. But I also don't know that it's like thorough enough. So I'll finish reading the paragraph and I'm like, okay, I have a vague idea of how this works, but how does that work whenever it's combined with this, or how do I mechanically make these things happen? And I don't feel that that's properly explained, and maybe there are like deeper tutorials I could look into that I just haven't. But to say positive things before I finish my monologue, I think the aesthetic's really cool. I like the idea of like, you're quite literally overseeing a work zone. You're saying, hey, go mine this out. There's gold blocks that you can go through. You're carving out places for rooms. You're building rooms. You're having workers, take care of business, monsters, defend your territory. I like the concept of it. I think it's really cool. And I think that it's very charming in that regard. But I was definitely overwhelmed starting with just the very first chapter.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you that this probably wouldn't be the easiest RTS to start with, just because, like
No.
you said, it's going to throw it right in your face. It's going to let you know this is exactly what you need to do, and then he will complain to let you know that your workers are not being fed or you do not have the money to pay them. He's going to let you know because he's like the union leader there. He is on the ball when it comes to letting you know what the problems are in your dungeon. So.
Yeah, and those alerts will pop up, and they're like, "Hey, someone's unhappy," and you're like, "Great, why are they unhappy? how can I fix that? Again, I guess it's the RTS thing. You got to figure that out. You got to be able to like roll with the punches. But I really wish I could just take a second and pause and say, he just said someone's unhappy. Let me look over there, click on this person. Some kind of box will tell me. Is there a way to look at a list of units? Like, I know that you can click on your minions tab and see how many of each you have.
Oh.
But can you find individual ones from a menu? Because sometimes it'll be like one of your, I don't remember any of their names. I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
One of your Balrogs is hungry,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Gnarlings.
okay, yeah, one of your Gnarlings is hungry, and I'm like, okay, great. Which one? How do I get him to the tavern faster? I don't know. It throws a lot of problems at you and expects you to know how to solve them, and maybe that's just on me for being new, for not understanding how to solve them just immediately. But it seems like I would have enough food ready, and then someone would be unhappy, and I'm not really sure why they're unhappy.
So the most important philosophy I took to this is, well, you guys, you can only complain if you're alive. So if I'm working on something that's far more important than you being a little sad, I'm going to ignore it. And that's mostly what that boiled down to for me. I ignored nearly every message about complaints unless they started rioting. And then I was like, okay, I should probably do something.
But, I was going to ask if either of you had faced any consequences from like mutiny or anything like that.
A little bit.
Once they started fighting each other, I would dismiss all of them and let them go take care of their needs, unless the need was money and I didn't have any, because then I just made them keep going until I could find more money, because they're going to keep complaining until I take care of that. So.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this I love RTS games. I've played a few, probably more than a few. But I've only really pumped hours into, maybe one or two, probably Total War, Rome 2, and like the Age of Empires series. Most of those games, the first two at least. So I really enjoy RTS games, and there's economy in both of those games, but it works really, really different from kind of how it does in this game. So Age of Empires is probably like the better example. That's something that I've put a lot of time into. So, whenever you create a unit, it doesn't have any desire, any need other than work or kill. If you create a whole bunch of villagers, you say, go farm, or go chop wood, go mine gold, go do whatever, and they will do that endlessly. Mm-hmm. Until they either get killed or you move them to another task. If you go and play the Total War series, there's an economy with that as well. Like making sure you don't run out of gold, but and food also comes into that as well, but not in quite the same way. And it's not something that I really understood in this, how important keeping your workers, fed, happy, make sure they're sleeping. It's almost like I don't know if you guys have ever played it, but Roller Coaster Tycoon with this, where like you have to make sure that your guests are like well fed and like happy, and they have proper bathrooms and stuff. And I didn't realize that. I've never played an RTS like this where I have to make sure that my workers are going to be kept happy. And I'd be sitting there watching them work. Specifically, it's one of the little dumpy unit who creates little cores or whatever for you to build traps with. I can't remember what they're called. But I was getting really, really frustrated because they kept on walking away from the foundry. And I'd click and drag and drop them back on it and click and drag. I'm like, work, get back at it. And I was so frustrated because I was like, why aren't they listening to me? These guys are not listening to me. Or my little minions, little workers would go and they just start claiming tiles and claiming tiles, and I'd be like, stop. But I didn't realize that, one, this requires more micromanaging than your average RTS. Well, not average, more than, again, something like Age of Empires. And two, trying to micromanage at the wrong times can be more hurtful than it is helpful. And the way what I'm referring to is, again, my little guys working at the foundry. They're working, and then they start walking away, and I'm like, no, get back to work. And I keep on clicking and dragging and bringing them over. What I didn't realize is that they were either going to go to sleep or go to get food, and I was stretching out that time because I didn't realize that they had to actively eat and sleep. And initially, that was really frustrating because I was like, why are they not doing what they're supposed to be doing? And then once I realized that, oh no, this game has a lot more going on. Like, I have to actively keep my workers, minions, happy or they're going to revolt. I ended up really enjoying it, but it took probably 4 levels before I actually realized like how important it was. Like, it wasn't enough to just have the tavern. I thought that the tavern was just going to feed them automatically. Like, no, they have to go to the tavern or they have to go to the barracks. I mean, not to the barracks, but to the you know, sleeping quarters to actually, lair to actually like sleep. But once I kind of like got a grasp on all of that, I started to really enjoy it. But I was extremely frustrated, and I was looking it up, and I was like, "Why do they not listen? Like, I'm assigning them to this block, and they're not using it." And the game isn't really. It tells you that you need a lair for their minions to sleep. It tells you need a tavern so they can eat, but it doesn't explain that they are actually going to take time doing these things. And maybe that's just on me for trying to like force my little minions to work incessantly, but I think they could have been explained a little bit better. Maybe it is somewhere and I just didn't notice it, but
I think what you're talking about is like mechanically very interesting. Like they're actually out there living lives, more or less. But they do have to go to their lairs. They do have to go to their taverns. So the thing is, the amount of workers, depending on how many workers you have, I can't talk today. I apologize. The amount of workers or monsters or whatever you have determines the amount of layers that you need. It determines the size of the tavern that you need. And if you get spread out, you might need to even build more, like closer to new areas and stuff like that. I think the main thing that would help this game be less opaque in my mind is if there was just small little like fractions, just like you have this many workers, you have this many layers. Because in general, unless I need to build defenses, if there's just any empty tiles anywhere, I'm just building layers there because I just want people to have enough to sleep, and I have no idea how many layers.
You can hover over it and it'll show.
It'll say, will it show me how many I need?
It'll say, like if you hover over a layer, it'll say like 12 out of 14 spaces filled.
I see. Okay, I'll eat that one then. I'll take that one. But
I mean, that's not really explained to you unless you
it's just
I mean, I hovered over it because I was interested. Like, is this going to show me anything, or is it just aesthetic at this point? And it said like 12 out of 14. And I was like, okay, that's good to know.
So if you hover over like the tavern, does it say like this tavern can feed this many people, and you have this many people who need to eat, or anything like that? Because that's a similar complaint.
So the mechanic works a little differently. So there's not a fraction.
I guess it's like a rate of feeding, like how quickly.
Yeah, pretty much. So anyone can go and eat. It can feed an infinite amount as long as as long as it's producing food fast enough. So in theory, you can't have too many minions that it won't produce enough food. But it shows like a circle, and the circle will fill up. And once it's at max, like green, the ring is all the way around it. That means that it's at full capacity as far as food. So it's producing the max amount. If it drops below that, then you know that, okay, I'm not producing food fast enough for my minions.
Okay. I gotcha. That is useful to know.
You can also take the little piglets and drop them in it, and then they'll like squeal and get like ground up.
Just like real life.
Exactly, yeah.
John, I feel like we took this for a ride.
No, that's fine.
Where do you want to direct us next?
That's great. Okay.
There's just a lot mechanically. It's hard to not talk about everything.
Exactly. So that was a great coverage of all the different mechanics, and we've mentioned a few buildings, but we're going to start with Chapter 1. It only introduces a few core buildings for us. So it's going to be the dungeon core, which is going to be where our Underlord is housed, and we have to protect that with all costs. Because if that goes down, that is our Underlord, and he is gone again. And then our other buildings are going to be the vaults, which is where we store our gold, the lairs, which is where our minions are going to be sleeping, and the gateways, which is where our minions will come out of after we build the appropriate structures or buildings that they like. And then we also have the barracks, which is introduced here for Chapter 1, and that is going to be what conjures our first available unit, which is the Gnarling. Attracted by the barracks, these green-skinned scrappers aren't quite right in the head, and they will happily hack at all the foes until someone is dead. So that's going to be our first unit, and then we learn that we can actually use spells and such in these encounters as well. And one cool little feature of this game is actually the possession spell, where we can take control of our minions and run around as them and defend our dungeon. So speaking of that spell, yeah, did anybody give that a try, or did they like it?
All right. Go ahead, Ryder.
I thought it was fun. It's not like something that's necessary, and at this point doesn't make a huge difference. Maybe once I start getting, I'm assuming we'll get really big units later on, and it'll be fun taking control of some like huge, beefy dude. Because I don't want the AI to control him. Maybe with the Gnarlings, it wasn't as important, especially later on when I got a whole bunch of units. But at the very beginning, when I didn't really know mechanically, how the rally flags worked. It was really nice because, maybe they were all attacking one unit in particular. Well, I could run and hit, a ballista or, or turret or whatever there is in the corner. That way, it's taking off my units at a distance, and I can get going like that until it is destroyed. So that was nice because I could kind of do my own thing while focusing on them. But as I got further into the actual game, I stopped using it.
Too much.
If nothing else, it's a cool gimmick. Do what?
Too much management going on to worry about possession.
Yeah. Well, once you get up to the point where, one level I had 50 people total between, all of my units. I couldn't be bothered to even mess with it at that point. It was easier to just click a rally flag and let them do their thing.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It was cool. It was just kind of like an extra thing, but I don't think I did it past maybe the second level.
Right.
And I was just kind of like, I was like, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is strategic. And, if I only had one minion left, sure, maybe I'd do this to survive. But it just feels like, in general, there are better ways to spend your time. Because when you're possessing a unit, you can't do anything else but fight as that unit. So, I don't know. It was neat, but I didn't do it too much.
Right. Understandable. And then one building I forgot to mention, which is probably one of the more important, is the slaughter pen, which is going to be where the micro piglets are grown, and those are going to be feeding your minions. And then one unit I forgot to mention, what is also the most important, is actually the workers. So these were mentioned by my co-hosts here, but these workers are going to be drilling out and mining out all of the resources, such as gold. And then they're also going to be making and designing the rooms as you saw fit to tell them to destroy the rock in different formations to make your rooms. So for all of these introduction buildings, the options are 3x3 rooms and as big as you want to make them. So the larger the room, the more units that they can hold. But most of these buildings are going to be 3x3 to start with, except for the lair. So that can be as big as you want to make it. So it could be one tile, and the vault can be as small as one tile. And then those can be used in hallways and such just to fill up the gaps and to allow you extra storage or sleeping quarters. So does anyone have any information they want to cover on the first one? Sorry about that.
No, I do. So as far as the room scaling, I think it's interesting because, if you build a barracks, which attracts gnarlings, if you build it 3x3, then it attracts a certain amount. And then if you build another 3x3 one, it's going to attract another of that same amount. But then if you were to build it 3x5, which takes up less total space than having two 3x3s, it's a lot of numbers, then it's more efficient. So basically, the bigger you can make single rooms, the more effective. And I think that's a really cool mechanic. I think I really, 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 really want to like this game. I like a lot of parts of this game, but a lot of it is, and again, it could just be me being new to RTSs. A lot of it is so opaque and seemingly more difficult than it needs to be just to do things. And so, the tavern, as far as I'm aware, is the only room that can't work in a 3x3. And it's just why not? And then we unlock another room later, which I won't spoil, but it can only be a 3x3. Like if you expand it to 3x5, it doesn't give you any bonuses. And maybe that's explained, but that just seems like needlessly tedious whenever you have 7, 8, 9 different types of rooms that you're juggling and trying to put out. They're like, okay, but this specific one functions this certain way when you're trying to build it. And it's like, okay, does that add something to the gameplay? Like, does this make this do these differences make them more interesting, or do they just make them more tedious? And that's kind of where I'm at. But I mean, overall, the concept's really cool of just building rooms and maximizing the space that you're using.
Perfect. Right.
So-
Any other input?
Kind of, piggybacking off of what Kurt brought up, it's not something that like has. I agree with what you're saying, but it doesn't really irk me one way or the other. Like it's weird that for whatever reason these like the tavern is a 3x5, I think, instead of the 3x3. I can kind of understand it because they have like the kitchen area plus the table is what they're going for, I guess. But I mean, they very simply could have just had a table filled with meat, and that would have done pretty much the same job. That maybe there's the argument that it's necessary and it takes up more room, and mechanically that's why it's there. Is it's necessary, and you have to block off a 3x5 space on your floor, and in a limited dungeon space, some of the dungeons have. Yeah, as you go further on, have increasingly more complex layouts that make planning harder to do. Maybe that's part of it to force you to think about okay, this is going to be a 3x5. I'm blocking off more of my space. I need to make sure that this is going to be an appropriate location. I don't know if they actually thought about it, but
that's a good justification, though.
Yeah,
we're still like even I feel like 7 levels in, and it might be like this till the end of the game, but I still feel like we're getting a lot of almost tutorial-ish stuff happening.
Oh yeah,
and so I'm thinking that now that we're pretty much at the halfway point, maybe we're going to get a lot more, of these like more complex rooms as well, and maybe things that aren't going to take up the traditional 3x3 as well. But maybe they're just starting as small. I don't know. Like I said, it's not something that irked me, but it is a weird choice that it would be a 3x5 when everything else is a traditional 3x3. On the topic of the workers, though, kind of talking about this just at a very broad level, the workers are interesting. You start off with, I think, 4, and their main goal is to, work for you. And so compared to, again, other like RTSs, again, in something like Age of Empires, you have your workers, they're called villagers, same thing. If I want to create melee units, I say, go here, build a barracks, and they go and build it, and then it pops up on the map. And I have to use resources to create, a melee unit. If I want to create a swordsman, I have to pay a certain amount of gold and food, and then they, bloop, pop up on the map. And this game, very, very different. The workers, they go, and I really like the fact that they have to kind of tunnel out the underground to create this lair for you. Not to be confused with the lair where your minions sleep. And I initially it was weird, but I ended up growing to really like it. The workers, they just kind of, their real purpose is to dig out tunnels, clear out larger areas, and then claim the tiles. And I like that, ultimately. Age of Empires, you don't really have to claim. Most RTSs, you don't really claim land. You just kind of take it and kind of grow and grow and grow, and, you keep that land by fighting off, outsiders. I like that this is objective-based. It's really fun because of that, because everything's kind of more contained that way. I like the fact that, if I want some gnarlings, some melee units to come and fight for me, I don't make a barracks and then click however many I want, and then it creates the unit. I have to make a barracks, and then they can choose to come to me. and they can fight for me at that point. And I really like that because Age of Empires, you can stockpile, and you can play it very differently. You can just stockpile resources, and then just spam and make 30 melee units. And this, though, it's more long haul, and you have to really think from the very beginning of each level, like, okay, am I going to go ahead and clear out this area and build a barracks right now, or I'm going to clear out this area and do this or that? And again, economy management, where if you spend all of your gold too early by creating like a whole bunch of units or whatever it may be, you can get in real big trouble because your units will get angry because they haven't been paid maybe in 45 minutes down the line. So very different gameplay, and I like all of those elements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So a lot of wonderful opinions going on here. I'm glad to hear about the different mechanics you have liked and you haven't. It's nice to see the varying degrees of familiarity with it as well. So this will bring us to the end of chapter 1. So our base is going to be invaded by some spirits, and it's going to be our goal to take these spirits out with our gnarlings. And after we clear out all these spirits, that's the end of our chapter. And so at the end of this chapter, we're going to be thrust forward into chapter 2, which is going to be Keep, where we will be entering the realm of Kairos and its empire. And so our job is going to be to destroy 3 inhibitors that block off the rest of the kingdom from our invasion. So this is where we will begin our first official mission. So an imperial keep guarded by Lord Rusimov. An accident has left his face melted, but as we know from the Hound, this does not stop anyone from being a vigilant fighter. So to move forward in our journey,
a violent sociopath.
Yes, we said the same words. All right. And so to move forward with our journey, we have to defeat him and destroy our first inhibitor so we can continue forward, because these inhibitors do stop our underlord from progressing and taking over areas. And so just to get a nice start, whenever we get into this chapter, we're introduced to our second unit, the Cultist. And so the Cultists are attracted by our new room called the Archive, and they're attracted to the magical tomes we keep there. And they spend most of their time researching sins for us, which is the upgrade mechanic for this game. And as they work and progress on getting us more sins, we can upgrade our different facets of our armies and different features that we will get later on. So, but more on the Cultists. They are pretty weak combatants, but they will curse our foes, leaving them weak to our other minions' attacks. So, anybody have any thoughts on Chapter 2?
I think the Cultists are cool mechanically. As far as, they're kind of useful in combat, but the main thing is just forward progression. You're basically leveling up every time you spend a sin. But it's weirdly restrictive, and again, maybe this is just early game syndrome, but I remember at one point I had 7 sins that I could use to unlock new abilities, and they just wouldn't let me unlock any of these new abilities. I was like, I want these, how come, what's going on? And then I get to the next level, and it would just be like, here is the thing you automatically need to unlock this new ability you wanted to buy last level. So that's kind of weird, how seemingly your progression is tied to what you decide to value the most whenever you're building your layer, but it's not really. Progression's more tied to just progression through the levels. But mechanically, I think it's really interesting. I like how they debuff the enemies, and that's actually really surprisingly helpful whenever you send a large amount of them to go take on enemy forces.
Right, and one thing I want to bring up before we continue is my thought on that was maybe they thought they were throwing way too much at you, and they were like, well, we don't want to throw all these upgrades at them right off the bat, and they're just going to progressively throw those as well as new units at you so you can get comfortable with what they have thrown right in your face, so you can get more adjusted to these new things so you're not being overwhelmed too much.
Yeah, but they have the upgrades in different trees already. They have spells, traps, etc. And so you have to buy this one, or you have to buy these few in order to buy anything further down. I feel like there's still a way to limit what you were able to purchase, because it's not like you could just stockpile sins. I mean, if you spend the entire like second level just trying to unlock everything immediately, then you're going to lose a level. You know, obviously, I don't know. There's some balancing finesse there that I think could pay off
Right.
personally.
So I pretty much share the exact same opinion as Kurt on this. I think around maybe level 5, they start lifting some of those restrictions and allowing you to purchase, skills. But I gave up. I even at one point I don't think I had any cultists. I mean, pretty much for like levels like 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I didn't have any unless they were given to me or I needed a skill point because they're like purchase this blah blah blah, and I was like, oh, okay, well let me make an archive real quick. But maybe they'll become useful later. But even when they took off those restrictions to allow me to use the skill tree, not all of it, but at one point I noticed maybe 8 perks total. I didn't even look at it because I was like, or I could just use my 20 gnarlings and all this other stuff to just bum rush, the key, like win it that way. And so I kind of like that I don't feel restricted. I don't feel like I have to use the skills to progress. But at the same time, they waited so late to make them truly available that I don't care. And, maybe the next mission I'll be like, oh, wow, I wish I would have been unlocking them, but I haven't at the moment. Which brings me to kind of my next question with this. Did anyone unlock any additional sins or skills or whatever? And if you did, do they carry over throughout that entire playthrough, or are they restricted to that one world?
They carry over, and there are a lot of useful things in that skill tree once you get later on in the chapters. However, I do want to agree with you guys, especially considering the way they unlock things in that skill tree. It will be like a constellation. It will just unlock varying things all over the upgrade sections. Like it'll give you one at the very top left corner, and in that same chapter it'll unlock one at the very bottom. Why they're not just together, who knows? But I could understand the confusion with that, or the lack of interest. And then another thing I wanted to mention, it's funny to hear you say that you never really use the cultists. That just shows you just all the different ways that you could play these campaign missions, because in my head, I'm one of the jack of all trades. I want to make sure I have at least a few units of each one. Does that make my army composition better? Probably not. But
probably
in my head, I was like, I must have at least 1 or 2 of every unit, just because it just made sense to me. But hearing about an army of 20 gnarlings headed in, I don't think it's going to very much matter if some of the enemies were a little bit weaker for 3 seconds. So I'm sure it evens out. Go ahead.
I do the same thing as Ryder's talking about. I will build an archive or two, but pretty much anytime I find a big open space, unless I need a tavern or something, I just build barracks and I just get gnarlings and gnarlings and gnarlings. And I'm actually wondering if that's like what I should still be doing. If I'm, if building like a foundry for those Galumpas would be better, or like beast dens. Beast dens seem cool, but are they? I don't know. I don't know how the different units like rank like in combat effectiveness and things like that. But to go back to like what you were talking about, the disorganization of like unlocking the new skills, that's kind of a thing with the menus in general in this game. So you'll have your 6 rooms and they'll be like, all right, we're introducing these 2 new rooms, and you go to your menu and they're not just added to the end. They're just like put randomly in the middle, and that happens like with spells and everything. So at one point I just went in and had like 8 sins that I hadn't spent yet. I just unlocked like a ton of spells, and I went and I was like, where's lightning bolt? Where's my healing spell? I need to use these really bad.
I don't care about anything else.
By the way, those 2 spells and the create worker spells are basically the only 3 spells that I've used the entire time.
Right.
Yeah, Ryder, I see you nodding.
I'm gonna wait on that.
I was going to say,
okay,
I'll cover a few more as they're unlocked, but yes, I hadn't mentioned any spells at this time yet. So if you want to cover any of them and explain what those do, the names on those are probably pretty self-explanatory, though.
Yeah, I didn't mean to jump ahead, but like
fine.
you have you have 2 meters at the top. You have a gold meter and a mana meter. Your gold is obviously your resource to build and pay your minions, but then your mana is what you can use to cast spells of your own. And those do a variety of things, from inflicting damage to enemies to healing your units to making your units more effective to making things be able to be built faster, things like that. But like I said, I use lightning, which deals damage to units whenever they're inside your base. Heal, which heals your units, and then create worker, which create workers. This is interesting. I like it. You can basically create as many extra workers as you want, but if you do, every time you make one over after your 5th one, it just reduces your total mana that you have available to you at any given time, which I think is a really cool trade-off, because sometimes you really just need to get things done. And so I usually just at the start of every level, whenever I'm trying to build my base out, just spawn like 5 of those things, and then just regret not having enough mana whenever I'm trying to electrocute the enemy's armies after all of my units have died later on.
Well, you can get rid of those summon workers.
Yeah, but I don't remember how.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you. So you just
drop them in the meat grinder.
You pick them up and you put them. You pick them up and put them in your dungeon core, and it gets rid of them.
Okay, dungeon core.
And then it'll give you your
meat
spell.
grinder.
Yeah, same thing. And it'll give you your spell points back for that.
If you put in the meat grinder, do you get your spell points back? Because that'd be funny.
Yeah, you do, and it counts as food for your, your army. So
well, there you go. Cannibalism at its finest.
Ryder, you're making fun of me. How many workers do you usually spawn?
Max immediately.
Just as many as you can.
So, I realized that's why it got. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit.
That's
I think
fine.
it'll probably be okay. Just the next level, the 3rd level. The map becomes more of like a tower defense game. I believe it's in the 3rd. It might be the 4th, where you have to place traps, but
it's the 3rd level.
Yes,
the 3rd. So I got extremely frustrated with this level because I played it the first time and didn't realize that Ready or Not, Here They Come was happening, and I lost the first time, like 40-ish minutes. Yeah, like 45 minutes in, and I was keeping them at bay. I was shocking them and, like placing last-minute traps and stuff, but they ended up overwhelming me at the last second, and they ended up I don't think they destroyed my dungeon core. I think that I killed the last wave, and I didn't have like any troops, and I saw another huge wave coming, and I just went ahead and restarted. I was like, it's not worth it. I'm going to have to wait another 3 or 4 minutes just to see myself die. So I restarted. That time, I realized that the summon worker spell existed and spawned like 1 or 2, and then I was like, no. And I max spawned, immediately cleared out the entire dungeon, like claimed everything, and like had ridiculous amounts of like gold stockpiled immediately, and could get to work on everything else. And then as soon as that's done, I can use them for literally anything I need. It works. It jump starts you like way faster than anything else, going ahead and using them immediately. And as soon as I got done with them, I could immediately take half of them and just dump them into the dungeon core to get rid of them. So that was extremely helpful. That time, I was about to win, and I was in the enemy's like dungeon core, and literally probably another 30 seconds it would have destroyed. I mean, I was attacking their crystal, and it was raining really heavily that day, and then power cut off. And I was 45 minutes in, and I just done it back to back. So it was the second time I was about to win. I had to redo it a third time. Third time it ended up being okay. But moral of the story is, I just always spawn the max amount of workers, and it makes it so easy because you can immediately clear out everything, get as much gold as possible, and then toss them. And if you have to go this route, it's quite sad if you do. But you can use them for kind of cannon fodder. And, they're not really good at attacking people, but they can really slow down enemies. If, you absolutely have to, you can spawn extras just to kind of keep them at bay while you do whatever else you have to do in the meantime. I've done that before as well.
If they die, do you get your mana back?
Yeah, as soon as they die, it all comes back to your max cap, whatever that may be. So
Is
there's
there
no
a
reason to not spawn them.
Is there a benefit to having walls around your rooms? Like, obviously, there's defense bonuses of making it harder to get just straight at your core. But do rooms that have more walls get any kind of productivity bonuses, or is that just something I made up in my head?
There's no reason at all other than to route enemies and give them a harder time getting around stuff, or to protect your dungeon core.
Okay.
There's no other reason for it.
I don't know why I thought there was some sort of bonus in that regard for some reason.
I thought the game mentioned something about it, but I didn't notice any.
I might be wrong, but I haven't noticed anything.
I didn't do any testing, but I feel like it did mention it. Like, for example, there's a room we'll get to later on. I'll explain it, but it said that it makes the productivity in that room more quick if it were surrounded by walls.
Interesting.
I didn't test it, like I said, but
Here, John, you keep talking. I'm gonna.
Yeah. You're gonna what?
I'm gonna mute so you can't hear my keyboard. I'm gonna look it up. Go.
Oh, okay. All right. So, chapter 2. That's gonna be where we're at. We're taking out the first inhibitor, and that first inhibitor is guarded by Lord Rusimov. So, on this mission, we're actually introduced to a new object that appears on the map, and that's going to be the Perception Shrine. So as we take over the area around the Perception Shrine, we're also able to see the world visibility around that Perception Shrine, and it gives us, kind of indications of where we can build around those shrines, and just give us a little more map vision to make things a little bit easier. So a question I'm going to ask you guys: did you find the hidden item that was on Chapter 2? It's the first hidden item the game introduced that you had to mine to get to.
Before I answer that question, yes, walls increase productivity. I assume they have to be complete walls, like not just rock, but dungeon walls. And it's the amount of walls within a certain amount of tiles to the objects in the rooms that you're creating determine its effectiveness. So it's like 100% effective with no walls, and then you get bonuses for extra walls, I think. And to answer your question, no, what are you talking about?
So
I think so. It's little like
spiky orb?
Yes, spiky orb
like
in Chapter 2.
Yeah.
It was hidden that you had to dig to. It was a path, very specific path.
So I'll talk about what happened on my end then. Yeah, so I found it pretty easily. I don't remember where it was at, but I remember sending my cultist guy and getting it. And
yeah, it's in the top right corner of the map. You have to dig a very specific path to get through it, through all the hard rock that you can't mine through. So.
I like the artifacts. It's they're not necessary. They don't really, they add a short buff, and I really like that. You don't have to have them. It's not just like a collectible. It actually does add something. I think you do get an achievement for getting them.
The first one.
But it's nice being able to pick them up and have them investigated or whatever, and then in a pinch use them. At the very beginning, I didn't realize. I think they're like quick use items, and they're not supposed to be like. Yeah, I thought that like the effect was long term, and I was like, I don't want my workers to be hungry anymore, and I didn't realize that it was like an immediate, no longer hungry, no longer needing gold or whatever, and kind of felt like an idiot as soon as I did that. But I think I did like the next 2 or 3 levels as well. Yeah. So I was like, I get them as soon as they're investigated. I'd click and use them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I would say that finding that one was no big deal, but I just was curious to see if anybody else had found it. All right, so after we've taken out Lord Rusimov and we've taken down our first inhibitor, we are taken to Chapter 3. So after taking down that inhibitor, we will head toward the Citadel of Lord of the Land. Yes, that is his real name in the game. And our objective is going to be to destroy that second inhibitor to move forward. But to do that, we must defend our dungeon from waves of enemies attacking. So, for Chapter 3, we are introduced to a new room, and that's going to be the Foundry. So the foundry is a very important room because that is going to be where we build pieces to traps. And so in order to build these pieces, a new unit will be the Chunder. So the Chunder is a gassy creature with joyfulness, and he is actually going to launch the fetid contents of his stomach to attack. And then the other minions will probably want to keep their distance from him. And he's going to be living in the foundry, and he's going to be creating those parts for us until we tell him to go somewhere else and fight a battle for us. So, but the two main traps that I'm going to mention that we can use the foundry pieces for are going to be the Blade Lotus, which will pop out of the ground and attack our enemies. And the second is the Bombard, which is just a cannon that we set up in a hallway or a room to defend us with a ranged attack. And then obviously with our defenses, we're going to want to keep those safe, so we can also build doors to wall off locations for more protection. So, and then finally, the last new item for this chapter is the Gold Shrine. So we can assign workers to this room to infinitely mine gold for when we've mined out our section of the map and run out of gold. So that's going to be our new items for this map. So would anyone like to discuss their experiences with this one?
This was the level that I learned how to read the mini map, because the commander, Ryder touched on this a little bit, but he's constantly yelling and sending troops your way and telling you where they're coming from. You know, it's a tutorial on defending yourself. But he'll say things like, "All right, we're going to attack from the north and the south," and I'm like,
Yeah,
this is an isometric view, and there's nothing to the south." It made me realize, like, oh, everything's on the mini map is tilted like 45 degrees for some reason. Which, I mean, it works. I guess playing this at a diagonal is better, but it's just weird that the mini map's at a different angle.
you can rotate, but
you can, but that's
weird.
not default, and it's weird.
Yeah, I agree.
John, what did you think of this level?
Well, I thought, like Ryder had said previously, this is your first introduction to the defense mechanic, and he likened it to tower defense, and I'm going to say that's pretty accurate. So there's three main areas that they're going to be entering your dungeons. So the first area is going to be the very center, and they're going to be trying to just break down the wall that you had put up via the introduction to traps, and then trying to make their way through all the Blade Lotuses that you set up, because you definitely set up, at least 5 of those to defend your dungeons, right?
That's probably the thing that I craft the most of, if we're being honest with ourselves, because I'm still pretty bad at managing my army, and so I just make long straight, or not even straight, but just long single block tunnels from the enemy's location to like my core. And then I line every single tile with the Blade Lotus, and they usually I can take out an entire like wave of enemies just with Blade Lotuses.
Right.
Because I have trouble getting my units to go where they want to go, or where I want them to go.
Right. So the enemies will usually use the path of least resistance, and so you're designing that where it's just a long hallway of traps. That's a very good idea, because most likely they're going to go that way, or if not, they're going to break down 1 or 2 walls in another location to break in. But other than that, they're not going to dig long, elaborate hallways to get at you to avoid the traps, because they're forward thinking. They're just going to go right what's available.
So I think that as much as this level frustrated me, it was my fault. This is like nothing that the game can be faulted for, because it was like, hey man, like, you better dungeon lord, you better prepare, and I was like, yeah, okay. And the waves are coming, and they got increasingly worse, and I wasn't prepared to begin with, and this is one of those levels where like long haul, if you weren't prepared, and this whole game really, if you're not getting ready from the beginning, it can really hurt you later down the line. I kind of touched on it before as well. I like the fact that each of these levels is more objective based. A lot of RTS games, you can just play with all out offense, playthrough, and just craft or create tons and tons and tons of soldiers and just throw them at the enemy and just overwhelm them by sheer force. This game doesn't allow you to do that. Like a mission like this, where he tells you this fortress is impregnable, you're gonna have to try to wean them out here, and if you don't listen, you end up getting punished like I did. And I really enjoy the fact that it forces you to take the path that you otherwise wouldn't have taken. Because typically when I do play a game like this, I would just create 30 or 40 gnarlings and just bum rush them. Talking about the new units, so this the Chunder is introduced, and ignoring what he does mechanically, he's a fart monster, and it's kind of funny, almost gross sometimes. Like some of the sound effects are too real, and he'll be attacking someone, and you'll just hear him rip like a, it's really funny hearing it, but it just sparks up in my memory. This sound effects for the minions are hilarious. Where the Chunder is just a fart monster. The workers, they sound like Donnie from the Wild Thornberries. They're like, what are we doing? Any time I'm go build this, they're like, what are we doing? And that always cracks me up every time I hear it. And I think it's the Gnarlings that do this, but they sound like Gollum, and they literally do the. I don't know if you could even hear that with my mic. But
Discord is not happy with your impressions. It's protecting us from copyright.
I have the noise suppression on right now, so that's part of what it is.
Probably.
But they do an actual Gollum voice, and even say they stole it from us, and it's a direct quote.
This game's full of references.
Yeah.
I played several times on May the 4th, and there were Star Wars references every time I booted the game up, which was funny.
Cool.
That is funny. Okay. Okay. So anyone else got any information they want to share about Chapter 3?
Just at this point, I was still, frustrated. I feel like I didn't really understand what was happening. But I can talk more on that in Chapter 4.
Okay.
This level felt like a gauntlet, and I've already given my piece about it. But I feel like kind of going past this level, I really got a grasp on what this game was and how to play it. It took 3 times playing this level, but after I got done with it, I was like, I know what I'm doing now.
Okay, perfect. So one of the other spells that was not mentioned previously is Prophecy. And Prophecy, I felt, was a very important spell to me because, like those the stone I mentioned for Chapter 2, it will allow you to see temporarily a part of the map that you hadn't been able to see before, and that can help you in the beginning as much as those workers with the worker spell. It can help you to design and determine where you would like to put your rooms and where you can and can't build, especially early on. So that spell is highly important, I would say, when it comes to designing those dungeons, especially at the beginning, to try to get a head start, because it can even help you see the paths the enemies might be taking to attack your dungeon and prepare those defenses accordingly. So that might be something that may come in handy in these other chapters as well. So
yeah, that's one I forgot about, but it's one that I used later on, not so much for building my dungeon, but I would something I could probably speak on more in Chapter 4, but basically when I'm getting ready to take the fight to the enemy lines, I can use that to see what is my path of least resistance here, what rooms have the least amount of traps and enemies, and I can just cut through, because I don't think my army can survive just a full-on fight with their army, but I might be able to complete the objective before getting toasted.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I didn't use it for that much. I like to be a little surprised about the enemies I'm going to be fighting, but I used it for design. I may have to take your advice on that and start using it before I plan an assault, because that makes perfect sense. So one important aspect of the game that we haven't mentioned is that you can set up your certain units as peaceful units, so they will refuse to answer your call for a rally, and that is very important, especially for the Chunder. If you're in the beginning of your camp, your mission, and you don't want them going to fight or defend, you can tell them to be peaceful, and they will only build the parts that you're requesting of them. That way your supply line is not being diminished just because you need to defend your dungeon. And so that is a very important aspect, especially with the Chunder.
This along with the warbands mechanic that's introduced later, it's something that I wish that they would just have a list of all your minions. Because you can pick them all up at once and sort of put them in one place. Then they'll just scatter, so you're not able to easily select the units that you want to place in these certain factions. And so, honestly, a lot of the times I just don't do it and then suffer the consequences because it's less frustrating than just having to like manually click one by one. So I just wish you could just pull up a list and then just have like boxes of like what do you want them to be doing. Just like click, 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 click. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would make things less tedious and it wouldn't inhibit strategy in any way.
Absolutely.
I completely agree.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as mentioned, Lord of the Land sends all his waves of military at us. Luckily, he's nice enough to tell us which directions they're coming from, so we can prepare for that if need be. And then finally, he sends nearly all of his units, and he has nothing to protect his inhibitor. And so you could just walk right in and just take care of the few traps and the few enemies that are left, and take him out, take out the inhibitor, and that brings us to Chapter 4. So Chapter 4 is Turncoat Isle. And as you have probably guessed, since we've taken out 2 inhibitors, that only leaves 1 more before we can get to the mainland of this empire. So we finally fought our way to the last one, but an Underlord has decided to join the empire by guarding this island and the inhibitor. So
the traitorous coward
to defeat Underlord Marcus and destroy that last inhibitor. So with this,
Marcus.
Yeah, just Marcus. So with this chapter, we are introduced to constructs. So constructs, they can be placed in neutral territory, meaning it could be, as long as it's not your, well, you can place it in your territory, but you cannot place it in enemy territory. So one of these constructs is going to be the Underminer, and this is a bomb that you can place on the ground, which will explode and destroy brimstone, which your workers are unable to mine. So once a section of brimstone is destroyed by the Underminer, all the brimstone connected to it will also explode, clearing out areas for you to inhabit and increase your domain. So, and then another important construct for this area would be the Outpost, which allows you to expand your dungeon to new areas and build upon your territories far from the dungeon core, so the enemies can't claim it from you. So those are our 2 main constructs that are introduced here. And,
I forgot the Outpost existed until just now you talking about
I
it.
So, well,
I was like, what? I don't think I ever knew that existed.
So that construct came in handy on this map because this map is a bunch of small islands underground islands, and there's a lot of rivers running through here and water, and you have to build bridges to these other islands. And to just speed up the process of your minions taking these areas, you can just set up the outposts, and the minions will start claiming the areas around it, and you can start building and mining and everything. So it really helped out in mining that gold. But like we mentioned before, just the avenues that you choose are all your own, and you can try your best in any different way you would like. So any comments on that before I move forward?
I did the exact same thing, but with more micromanaging. There's like the workers have 2 buttons. There's one that's like do not claim or like impasse, which keeps them from going past a certain point. They can't go into those tiles. And then there's the other one, which is like claim, and I would just spam claim. I would make them build a bridge and just spam it over an area, and then they'd go and it worked fine because I had so many workers. I mean, I'd have like 20 or 30 workers at a time, and so like I never really had to worry about watching them. I would just go and click where I wanted them to claim it, and they go and do it for me.
Okay, so it's not any problems with expanding without the outposts then?
It's probably slower. I didn't use the claim spell. I assume it's a spell. I haven't been using that either, and it's been fine. I struggled a little bit towards the end, so maybe it's something I need to look into. actually have something positive to start out on this time. This was my favorite level, probably.
Mm-hmm.
This is where everything clicked for me. I think it was because this was a very much go at your pace level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have as much time as you need to amass your forces, build the dungeon you want, and then go complete the task. But the other side of that coin is the longer you take, the longer you're giving the enemy to build up their forces, and you're giving them more time to put up a better defense. And I really thought that was a cool trade off because so far it's just been frantic. Like the last level is just frantically trying to patch everything together so that you can survive because it's coming whether you're ready or not. And in this, there were still consequences for taking too long, but it felt like you were more in control, and it wasn't. It was more proactive than reactive, and so I really like this level. It's where everything clicked. I got to take the time to sort of read through stuff because I knew that early in levels I knew that I couldn't do that because I would just start dying, and so I really started to understand some of the more complex mechanics, and so I really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed just the concept of another dungeon being built in competition to yours. And so, the Empire troops don't really claim new territory. They just kind of have their strongholds and they'll come hunt you down, but they're not going to take more land. So I enjoyed the idea of more land being claimed and it being like a race for property, I suppose.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is also where the lair, not the lair, the
Mm-hmm. Yep. You want me to
Believe in
take
you.
it? You want me to take it from there?
yeah, just say it. I don't remember the.
All right. So my favorite room is unlocked on this chapter. So this is going
Beast
to be
Den.
the Beast Den.
Hey.
Exactly. So this is the introduction of the beasts. So they are a very special unit since they actually don't require payment. They only require food. And they also wander the map or even defend your dungeon until you give them other orders. So they will also fight until their last breath, but they cannot be saved if they fall in battle. So in this chapter, two beasts are introduced to us: the Oculus, and the Skarg. So the Oculus is the master of the mind. If it encounters an enemy, it will assault their senses, temporarily incapacitating them. And then outside of battle, they explore the map and provide vision. And then the Skarg. He is a deceptively cute beast that prefers the flesh of dwarves. They can be trained to fetch and return eyeballs. Why are you guys making me laugh? I'm so sorry.
It's not you.
You're good. No, you're good.
Ghost in my house that had a towel.
Oh, I wasn't even paying attention. Okay.
I'm just gonna keep going. So the Oculus, I really like, because there's a fog over everything, but the Oculus just sort of wanders around and clears that up, so that you know what to expect and you know what's coming. Basically, like a permanent perception or a prophecy spell. It's really nice, and perception shrines and whatnot. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that beasts couldn't be revived because I was kept wondering what's the downside to me just making a bunch of beast dens because they're proactive and they're less needy than my other workers. But I suppose it's because they're an investment, and once that's done, it's done.
Well, more
Also,
will spawn though, so you just can't revive the ones that are down. I would guess they're just gone.
Yeah.
So you can heal them and stuff, but yeah, once they're like knocked out, they're not knocked out like your normal units. They're just dead.
DED
Um,
dead. Yeah.
But your units can level up, so I guess you get to keep stronger units.
Yeah. And well, your beast can level up as well.
Mhm.
And I was going to say to the point of whether or not you can. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm saying it like it's in front of myself.
just go ahead. It's fine.
So
They can level up, but only through combat. So
yeah, only through combat. They can't train,
as
which
of
is
now,
fine.
right? Yeah.
So with the beast, I like the fact that if I'm going to create, I want some gnarlings to come to my dungeon, I can go to the different islands and be like, all right, barracks here, barracks here, barracks here. But with the beast den, it becomes less effective the more beast dens you have. It's better to make that one beast den bigger, or sell it and make a huge beast den. And it's not as much of an option here just because the land is split apart by water. But in later levels, I had a huge swath of land, and I would have been making barracks previously, but I was like, you know what, let's do it. And I just made a huge beast den, and they spawned pretty endlessly. And again, you don't have to kind of keep up with them the same way you do have like your normal minions. That's really nice. Um, I also like the fact that they kind of explore on their own and they do their own thing, and there's no real like I'm not upset when they die the same way I'm like if a gnarling dies and it's like a level 4 or level 5, I'm like, oh, that was an investment and it's gone.
Oh no.
Versus
Anyway.
exactly. But in Oculus, it can kind of roam and do its own thing and take out defenses on its own, and I kind of just let it do its own thing, and if it gets killed, it's not the end of the world. I can kind of just keep going because I know I have 3 or 4 other oculi floating around. And that's all I have to say about the Beast Den. I like the Beast Den. This level itself, it doesn't introduce a whole lot other than the Beast Den and kind of the constructs. I was going to say the Underminer. It's kind of underwhelming. And I couldn't help but think of The Incredibles, I'm the Underminer guy, whenever the actual item was introduced. I think there might have been a use on like maybe 1 or 2 other levels, but mechanically I was kind of like, I mean, I guess it's kind of cool. It's just another barrier, but it's not even a real barrier. Like I think that it would have been better if it would have required, like one of the little pieces that the Chunders make to create it. Something to kind of like be a trade-off where like, okay, there's an inaccessible portion of the map. I want the gold that's behind this, but I need to sacrifice something. But I mean, there's nothing you have to do other than assign a worker to it. So I don't know. It kind of feels like it's more of an annoyance than anything else, and maybe that'll be introduced later in some better way. But at the moment, I'm kind of indifferent.
How about I give you a little strategy I learned with the Underminer? So, it's introduced to destroy Brimstone. However, it also destroys other walls. So a good combination that you can set up would be to use your spell to reveal an area, and then to put down an Underminer while that area is still revealed, and you can blow a hole in the side of an enemy's defenses where their traps are less full, and you can just bypass a lot of those traps and just take out their armies separately from the traps.
Really?
This is why John is the smartest person on this call.
However, it only works
I tried
on
doing it.
Neutral area. So, and your worker has to be able to get over there without dying. So it's very specific areas you would be able to use it in.
I want to say that I tried using it on that same level at like the fort for the enemies, and it maybe it did something and I just didn't notice it. But it wasn't as noticeable as blowing up the Brimstone. So I think I was just like, it's useless, because I think I tried getting into like this itty bitty area where there was no defenses, but I'll try it again later.
The Brimstone is destroyed. It's sort of like everything's destroyed.
Yeah.
Whereas with regular walls, it's not quite that dramatic. So maybe that was the weakened effect.
Yeah. I don't know. It was on a reinforced wall. I don't know if
it probably had something to do with it too.
I think that might have been what it was. Maybe the wall's too strong for it. I don't know. I'll try again later though, because I am interested now.
Okay, well, I hope I've given you some alternative strategies, so hopefully that'll help you out a little bit. Did anyone else have any comments on chapter 4 here?
I think I'm good.
Okay, perfect. So with chapter 4, we have the option to destroy 3 different siege shrines that have been set up to help defend Marcus, but you can choose to take those out, or you can just go straight for Marcus. But after you destroy Marcus's dungeon core, he gives you one last word of warning, and he wants you to know that this campaign will be the end of you. But our fearless leader, the narrator, tells us to just ignore that gibberish, so naturally that's what we're going to do. So
go ahead. This is kind of related. So the narrator doesn't seem too trustworthy to me, and even as a bad guy, I'm like, man, this bad guy is a worse bad guy than me. Like, he's using me, maybe. I don't know.
Absolutely, that's how I feel.
I feel like that. Also, there's not a whole lot of story to this, but I am at least slightly interested by it. I don't know why it's been happening, but literally every time I finish a level, my game crashes. That's the only time it happens. But like literally, I finish the level and it goes into like the ending cutscene, and sometimes they're really short, and so it's fine, and the game crashes like after. But like the very last level I was playing, he was like, I thought the cutscene was done, and then he was like, Underlord, and it cut off, and I was like, no, that actually looked important.
Do you lose your progress?
No, I was also worried about that, but I loaded up. It's in the exact like same place. I start the next mission, like nothing happened. So I'm just missing out on cutscenes that are in between and that are longer than like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Sure, you
why.
could look them up on
Mess with
like
the
YouTube or
settings,
something.
but yeah, I probably can. I haven't yet. So I don't know. Maybe you guys know something I don't, but I think for the moment he seems kind of untrustworthy.
Well, if you need the lore for this game, I know pretty soon these nice guys at Backlog Crew are going to make a video about the first half of the game.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good.
Hopefully they know all about the lore and will tell it to the audience.
Hopefully. Something they haven't mentioned is the fact that you can save mid-game and mid-chapter, and you can reload from there if you need to.
You didn't know that,
Right?
Ryder?
Either. Nope.
I
meant to
save
bring that up whenever
constantly.
you said you had to restart a level. You can
I was going to not shame him
mid-level.
publicly.
No.
All right.
that's
Well, I
what
guess
this
I'll
is made
start
for.
doing that now.
Yeah, if you just
Yeah,
click
I'm not a saver. I don't save games. I live on the edge, and I lose hours of progress. I've
Right.
just gotten
And you
to use
refuse to be on the
autosave.
Pokemon Snap Backlog Crew when you do it.
Well, if it helps, the shortcut for that is Alt F4. It saves and closes the game for you. If you don't want it to close the game, you could just click Escape, which opens the menu, and you can click Save.
Or
The
you can
menus.
just click the menu button that's in the bottom left-hand corner, then click Save.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. If
It's
the
more fun to
escape
restart the hour-long mission from the beginning.
It's definitely more fun to lose all your progress. Yeah, that's
If
right.
the escape button scares you, you could just click the menu button. Okay, so there's your fun facts mid conversations there. So, anyone else had anything before I move us on to the next chapter?
Are we talking about Chapter 5 yet?
Not yet.
We're about to.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
He's so excited. Okay. So, Chapter 5. After the destruction of the final inhibitor, the magical barrier that has been blocking our path is now gone, and we can continue our campaign against the Empire. To march forward, though, we must take out the Dwarven guards that have bested another Underlord, Raskos, who has been forced by the guards to back off to his own realm, and they're actually trying to invade him at this very moment. So they have left a troop for us to fight off in order to provide the assistance to Raskos. So we must defend our walls against these waves of enemies, and then once we have defeated Belmorn's army, we can try to head to Raskos' realm and channel a ritual to get there to provide him assistance. And I've probably said his name different every time I've said it, but that's okay.
It's fine.
All right. So, important features of Chapter 5. We're given another new room. This time it's an alchemy lab, and this attracts the crackpot. So a crackpot is just a gnarling kin that spends most of his time concocting viscous brews and tinkering with cauldrons. So with these alchemy labs, we are able to craft potions that will help in our defense as well. So just to give you an example of one of these potions, that would be the Quick Freeze, which allows you to temporarily freeze any units in a specific location. Just be careful because it can also freeze your units.
Support characters useless. Make more Gnarlings.
I never found a situation where using the potions was helpful. And I also didn't understand because I thought it was kind of like a spell where I just kind of pulled them out of my menu. So it was like craft an ice potion. I was like, click. And I was like, what? Click. And then I just used all my resources and filled up my alchemy labs.
Use the ice potion. Use the ice potion. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, because it costs money to craft them, and then you still have to wait for them to craft them. And so
I used all my money.
Annoying. And then another construct that we're given on this map is the replacement earth. So we can use that to repair destroyed walls, and it'll help us to fill in any gaps in our walls and defend our dungeon. And then finally, we have talked about this mechanic before very briefly, but we are introduced to the war bands in this chapter. So we can separate our units into smaller groups instead of just one large mass of units. Or probably every mechanic that I've used is just send the entire unit composition I have at the enemies and hope for the best. So, anyway.
So like we talked about with the like the peace time whatever groups.
Peace was never an option.
With the war bands, it's just so tedious to like actually assign people to the war bands, and so it got to the point where I would just use the beast rallying flag and then the regular rallying flag as my like two war bands, which wasn't always great because sometimes there'd be four fronts I needed to defend. But man, is it harder than it needs to be to assign certain units to certain places.
I
But
agree with that.
it's good that there's the option because they don't introduce this until chapter 5. I wish they would have introduced it a little bit earlier, even if it is kind of hard to use, just because it would have come in handy. Is this also? I'm sorry, Ryder. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Is this also the chapter where we're introduced to rituals, or am I mixing things up?
Next chapter.
Okay, my bad. My bad.
Well, we're given a standard ritual to do in this chapter. So this is the ritual we're going to use to channel our powers to go to Raskos's realm after we have defeated these dwarves.
Yeah, I think we're basically like moving his core so that we can like go to his realm to like basically save him from the Empire's forces.
I thought this was the prison chapter.
No,
that's chapter 6.
That's the next one?
So
wow.
chapter
Okay.
5, we're defending from
Right.
waves of the dwarves and waiting for this
Yes.
portal to be opened up to get to
waiting for the
Raskos's
ritual to
realm.
finish.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was the level, like you guys mentioned earlier, where I was like, oh, every single level has like a unique spin on it. And I can't just use the same strategy, amass an army, and go kill everything like I was trying to do. This is the only level that I had to redo. It got a little bit hairy in chapter 6 and 7, but the first time I played this, I just tried to play it like chapter 4. And like I talked about in chapter 4, you just take your time, build up your forces, and go. And this one, that just does not work. And I realized right before I died, I was like, oh, I'm just supposed to survive until the ritual is complete. How's the ritual doing? And it was only at like 30% because I had rallied all my cultists to fight for the last 30 minutes. And I was like, got it. Understand the objective, respond accordingly. So this level was frustrating, but the second time through, since I understood that, I managed to use like the peace time thing on all the cultists. And then I got through it no problem. It was a pretty cool level.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty straightforward. I think I just with this, I think the dwarves are coming across like water. If I remember correctly, my biggest problem was I was running out of money because I was spending it all on traps, and I mean I had just a ridiculous amount of traps, and I don't think I ever really had to worry about them getting through. But my bigger problem was I had like 2 revolts happening because I was running out of money. Thankfully, they had scattered money far off in the middle of nowhere. But that was honestly a bigger concern for me than the actual enemies themselves, just because my coffers were constantly empty. I was constantly having to run to try and find more gold. So yeah, I didn't understand the ritual part at first, and I don't know how much it was me being stupid or just not paying attention or whatever, but I didn't really quite understand it at first either, just because there's so much happening with, as being told more of the story, kind of what's going on here, introduced to a few more mechanics, and the vigorous one being like, oh yeah, the ritual, and I still don't really completely understand the ritual other than homeboys have to stand there and twiddle their thumbs for 20 minutes while the percentage ticker goes up.
They're basically just spells that take longer to cast. Like you need cultists just to stand in the ritual room to cast rituals, and they're supposedly more powerful than spells, but I've never really used one of my own accord.
Other than that chapter, I haven't used any either.
But yeah.
It might come in handy later. Again, that's like the good thing and the bad thing about this game is that it's introducing a lot. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Every chapter there's something new, and I like that because I'm learning, and it doesn't feel stale. Because, again, going back to this, as much as I love RTS like Age of Empires and like even like the Total War series, you can only really learn so much after a certain time. You might get a new unit, but it doesn't really feel like the core game itself is evolving. This throughout his, every level felt like something new. But the flip side of that is every level feels like a tutorial, and you know, after 6 hours, you'd be hoping, halfway through the game that like is the tutorial almost done?
Do I know how to play?
Yeah, and I don't apparently, but I don't know. It's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
Okay. So with chapter 5, that was some. Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to throw in. I'm sure with all the content that's been released, there's like the harder modes that you can play the campaign on, and other bonus levels and things like that. I'm sure there's a meta to this that we are just barely scratching the surface on.
Yeah,
So it's approachable enough that you don't have to do the exact right thing to just, beat the main story, but that all these rituals and extra spells and spinning your sins in certain ways is going to be like a really valuable and precise, like, art or decision, just to overcome probably some of the more challenging things that the game might throw at you.
Right.
and I forget that again. I'm comparing it to things like uh, Age of Empires and Total War, and what I forget is that there's campaigns in those as well, and they really are to be. They're supposed to be a tutorial. There's a bit of a story to them, and it's fun. Different like objective-based things, like Age of Empires especially has tons and tons of campaigns. Most of them are kind of learning how to play each different civilization and like the different objectives. And then you have like the sandbox mode, and this game has a sandbox mode as well. And I again, I'm forgetting that most players who are going to pour tons and tons of time into this game, they might play through this campaign, but ultimately you buy an RTS for the sandbox stuff, or for like multiplayer to play against friends or people
Just
online.
imagine the meta for PvP for this.
Yeah, exactly. And again,
That's
I
gotta
think
be
about
crazy.
that, and like the game gets significantly better in my mind. Where I have to remember that, yes, we're playing this game, but I'm looking at it too narrowly, because even though we are playing like the campaign is to set you up as a player for everything else. And again, like the harder DLCs and stuff. So I can respect that.
Okay.
John, do you have anything else to say about chapter 5?
Yeah, so with chapter 5, that was one of the things I was surprised about, is that the ritual room was not a one-time use thing, like just for this chapter. And so whenever I was in this match, I looked at my units, and I had over 20 acolytes, and I was just like, what? I did not build that many of the rooms that they like. Lost my memory on the name of that room. But another important thing is, like you had mentioned previously, checking your objectives. So all of the objectives up to this point have been destroy the enemy's camps and destroy the leaders, grab the and break the inhibitor. Well, with this one, it's an optional objective to take out the seven different enemy spawners that are causing all of those units to attack you. And so, like you had mentioned, my first thought was, I have to go attack those. I have to get rid of that right now. And just wave after wave of enemies kept coming out of it, and I nearly lost all of my units. And I finally told them to back off. I think I took out 3 of them, and there were still 4 there, but they were still constantly spawning. And so after I backed off and let my traps and my lightning spell take over for a little while, I realized that, I should probably keep those acolytes alive so they can finish this ritual so this match is over, or this chapter's over. So yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind, is actually paying attention to the objective being given to you. So.
Yeah, I realized on the second time through that they were just spawning endless enemies, and that I could like go disrupt. I think they're called gateways to make sure that they would stop coming. Like you, I ended up defeating about 3 of those, and I didn't really find it necessary to defeat any more because I was able to just sort of hold them back whenever they decided to charge. Yeah, it was definitely was checking the objectives from there on out to make sure I didn't waste 50 minutes playing the level wrong.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else have anything for chapter 5? Okay, perfect. So that leads us up to chapter 6. So, completing our channeling ritual, we successfully enter the realm of Raskos. So the Empire has decided to take the battle to him and has invaded his realm in droves. So we have found their Imperial portal that they're using to invade, and our mission is to cut off any more reinforcements and supplies, leaving their army vulnerable And so that's where we're going to be in Chapter 6. So we're given a very important item in Chapter 6, and that's going to be the Beast Den upgrade. It's going to grant us access to the Bafu. So the Bafu are a terrifying force of way and claw. They may be sightless, but they have no trouble finding foes and slicing their enemies to ribbons. And then another beast given to us on this is going to be the Shadow. It clings to the dark corridors and it seeks the strongest foes it can find to strike them down with deadly precision before vanishing back to the dark. So both of these are going to be used, as well as the former beasts that we have gathered, to make it through this chapter, because I'm going to go ahead and bring this up while I'm finishing up the introduction and let you know that there's not a lot of gold in this chapter. So the beasts are going to be highly important in making it through this in one piece. And then the final two things that are brought up in this chapter are going to be the prison that we had mentioned a few minutes ago. And that's going to be used for reclaiming the units of Rascos that we can put them to work, and also taking our own prisoners in combat. And those will be put used to later in the chapter when we unlock the torture chamber. And so this torture chamber is used to convert units to our side or to kill the enemy units. And they will create spirits for us to use to explore the map. And then finally, the other new unit we receive with the torture chamber is the succubus. So they use their powers to corrupt enemy units and bring them under our dominion within the torture chamber. Or they can be used to charm targets and leave them infatuated in combat. So I know that was a lot to throw at you, but that's just the way this game does. So Chapter 6, I will let y'all take over from there.
Best chapter in the game, hands down. I love this. I've talked about it before. Every chapter is something different. I love the fact that we don't have a beast spawner, not beast spawner, but like a minion spawner, like we typically would. You have to start off with just a beast in and kind of go from there. I love the idea of it limiting you in other ways, like you don't have the gold, and this is kind of where you realize how valuable beasts can be, because in the earlier chapters, past 2 or 3, you could use them, but it wasn't really necessary. But at this point, you have to use them. In the game, it's a great teaching tool, because the game is like, all right, now you're going to use these, because you don't have an option at the moment. And I like the beast. It's much easier to create a huge beast in than I have to worry about creating. I have to have enough gold for them. I have to have a tavern. I have to have a lair. I have to have all this other stuff. Now they do have to have food, but minimal effort comparatively.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you get your units because they're in prison, and you're letting out Rascos's units and using them for your own motives. That's a really cool mechanic. And then even further, again, you can't spawn your own guys other than the beast. Is being able to convert the dwarves later on is super cool. I think I ended up having the biggest military or army on this map. I ended up with like 100 units or something like that. And I mean, they were just like tearing through my gold reserves, but it didn't matter because I just, had an endless line of, people to send over at the enemy. I thoroughly enjoyed this because it was the first time that felt like I could just, even though I didn't have gold, I could stockpile on units and just send them to absolutely ravage everything. And that was really fun for me.
Yeah, this level made me really like the beasts even more than I already did. And whenever we were introduced to like the new types of beasts, I was just like, more, give me more. I don't want to like any other kind of units. Just give me more beasts. Rescuing the prisoners, adding them to your army was really cool. It was really satisfying to, press forward and kind of just barely make it at first. But then as soon as you break through to like a new prison, you set everybody free, and all of a sudden your ranks are refilled. And you're ready to go for round 2, clean up the mess that might have been made in the process. Torture chambers are interesting mechanically. I didn't get a giant army. I think part of the reason is because most of the time I was using it to turn enemies into specters, because I just in general want to be able to see as much of the map as possible at any given time, so I can like figure out a better plan. And the specters are kind of like the Oculus, where they just kind of explore and just kind of show you new stuff. So I really like that. But you were talking about the sound effects earlier of like the little things that all your minions say. You're talking about how like the scabba like makes all the gross like bodily function sounds.
Gender.
And yeah, that one. Um, it's usually, I mean, there's like obviously terrible things happening. And they're like, yeah, we're demons. Haha, let's talk about hell like it's funny. And yeah, whatever. That's humorous, crude humor and all that. But you go to the torture chamber and you put these people in these racks, and it's awful because they're like, "Please, I have a family," and it's like, "Oh, I'm doing bad things. Like I've been doing bad things the whole time, but
Doing
this is the
bad
first time I
things for
actually
the torture
I
chamber.
feel bad for doing bad things."
The Gnarlings have families too.
Do they? Is
Yeah.
that
They're
is that
all-
in the lore?
They're all related.
Oh, okay.
Um, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I wish I had. It's one of those things. I guess like you have to kind of like go over, hover, and like zoom in to really hear that type of stuff. But I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I was going to say, as far as exploring this area, I just used prophecy a lot. I know you weren't doing that. I guess you were using that to like try and find where like enemy units were, but
Sometimes, yeah.
I used it a lot, and towards the end, I didn't even bother stopping my workers. I had so many workers. I mean, like I said, at some points I'd have like 30. So I mean, I had roads paved everywhere, and like if there was an empty space that a worker could get to, it was going to be claimed, which is dope because I could just spam, lightning at enemies when they were on their way. So I never really had to worry about searching. So I made tons and tons and tons of dwarves, like converted them to my side. Like I said, I think I had like almost 100 by the time I like actually finished the level, and it was ridiculous. And what's funny is like someone would revolt. I'd have like 4 or 5 be like, "I'm angry," and then the others would just like mob violence, and they'd be dead almost immediately. Like it would pop up and say like, "A minion is rebelling," or revolting, and I'd click on like the little sword to like snap me to it, and they're already dead. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like there'd just be like 3 or 4 dead corpses laying on the ground at that point. But yeah, I like this mission. This is my favorite.
Okay, did y'all do the optional objective to convert the bard to your side?
Hmm.
So if I remember correctly, it said your minions want to hear a nice tune. Convert the bard and he'll go to the tavern.
I honestly don't remember much about it. I remember like throwing him like on the rack and just
Forgetting
like,
about it.
going. Yeah, I just went and did my own thing after that.
Well,
Yeah, what happens, John?
so if I remember correctly, after he converts to your side, he'll go to one of your taverns and he'll just go play some music in there. It's great.
It's awesome.
Cool.
It's a nice
Yeah,
little extra thing.
I haven't really been doing the optional objectives. I'm doing my darndest just to survive and beat the level, and I would just be stretched far too thin
I mean,
to do the. I mean, I know
I
that
understand that.
yeah, I know that the bard probably wouldn't have been like that challenging, but it was more that I just wasn't paying attention to
Well,
the
it does take
optional
that extra
objectives.
part in your head to be like, oh yeah, I need to go see if that does anything. Oh yeah, I need to go put him on the rack. You know?
So I just threw him on the rack, and I was just like, more cannon fodder.
He was just doing it anyway.
I kept on like having to build bigger prisons where I could because I was like, I need more, and that's why I ended up running out of gold because I just had so many people running around the map.
Did you turn this into
I
Prison
didn't.
Architect?
Yes.
No, you could build prisons in this level. I didn't think you unlocked that until the next level. So anytime my prisons were full, I just took the weakest ones and put them in the meat grinder.
In the grinder.
Yeah.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so does anyone else have anything on Chapter 6?
Mm-mm.
Okay, perfect. So we are able to shut down the portal that the enemies have been using to invade the realm. And after we're doing that, we realize that Rascos has been all but defeated. His minions are dead or imprisoned, so it is up to us to take the lead in this final battle against the remaining troops. So while defending the defeated Underlord, we press on against the Empire's assault. Hard. So Chapter 7 this allows us 2 different rooms that are available. So the first is going to be the garrison, and then the next is the arena. So the garrison is a defensive room that attracts the ogre. Not to be confused with an ogre, like Shrek. The ogre with an A. So the ogre is a master of metallurgy and is obsessed with this skill so much that they build their own bodies of weapons and armor in the form of metal that they craft. And so they also will stay on this defensive structure, and then of course they're going to be great in battle with their giant hammers. And then the other room is going to be the arena, which attracts the Beastmaster, which will train your beast to be even more dangerous. So those are your 2 new units for this area. And I don't believe there are any new map items that come up. So I'll take it to you guys to talk about Chapter 7.
I really like the ogre enemy, like the design, and just like Ryder was talking about having like a big beefy guy, and so maybe I should try using like possession on him. That might be interesting to play as. As far as the name thing goes, I wonder if that's just like a dialect thing, like how there's different spellings for color depending on what part of the world you're in. I wonder if that's the same basic concept.
They wanted to be different.
Yeah, that's maybe just flavor.
True.
I didn't really use the garrison. I didn't deploy the garrison. Never mind. At all.
I actually realized that whenever you said you wanted a big unit earlier, and I was just saying, wonder if you knew about this one.
Well, so it said it, whenever it's like, this is the garrison, blah, blah, and I was just like, ignore it. Because I looked at it.
I just assumed I had to, so I just did.
Is it like a 1 tile? Like little.
It's a 3x3.
Yeah, and then you make
it makes a tower, but it's a 3x3 room.
So I don't think I ever used that. I did use the beast pin or whatever it is, and I hope it didn't kill. I don't think it was killing them, but
no, it trains them, levels.
You can drop as many in as possible. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I started clicking and dragging, and I dropped like every one of my beasts into it, and I ended up with like a whole bunch of like level 5s running around.
That's
like
cool.
Skargs and everything. And you could drop any type of monster into it, so it was cool.
Oh.
And I think I only had like 1 Beastmaster, but I had a huge beast den on this map. It's probably my biggest beast den, and then I dropped them all into the training pen. But I like this as well. I like the objective on it. I think you had to kill like 200 dwarves. It was a nice change of pace. I ended up with a whole bunch of gnarlings as well. This level was fun, but was more of a slog than anything else because I had so many traps. I was just pumping them out as fast as possible. And at the very beginning, and he's like, "We gotta get ready, we gotta get ready." And I was like, "All right, this is like number 3. I'm not gonna mess up like that time." And it ended up, working out okay. Like I don't think I lost many men at all. They never got even close to my dungeon core, but it went on and on and on. I feel like it just took forever to get through this one. Luckily, I did learn from, like I said, playing through the 3rd level 3 times, and so I was more than prepared by the time they actually showed up. But at this point, the objective itself was cool, but it went on for so long that by the time it was over, I was just like, "Come on, I'm ready to move to the next level."
Yeah, I agree that this one was kind of a slog, but unlike you, I was not just plowing through and not losing anybody. I set up my dungeons best I could, and then I put the blade traps literally down every single hallway that led to my core. Then by the end of it, I thought I was going to lose. I was like 20 enemies away from reaching the goal, and I had about as many enemies left, or not quite as many enemies left on my own. I was just spamming lightning, desperately hoping that I could like defeat the last wave before before my forces were overwhelmed and they just came to my core and there was nothing I could do. So it was very tense, but not in like a, oh, this is exciting, I better adapt quickly to overcome this challenge, but just in a very, oh my gosh, this took a long time to build up and it's taking a long time to complete. I really hope I don't die. And I ended up not dying.
Nice.
I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, thank you. I was like, oh sweet, I beat the level. All my guys are dead, but I beat the level. And then the narrator's like, now venture into enemy territory and do the thing. And I'm just like, okay. So I spent like an extra 30 minutes, like waiting for my forces to regroup, like summoning more monsters and building more dens and everything like that. And then just using lightning to fight the enemies that would come in like 5 or 6 at a time. And that part was really, really just nothing but sitting around and waiting and just probably being ineffective with my time, but just waiting for my enemies to respawn so that I could take on like the final area. And then, I promise I'm almost done. And then I go to the final area and I figure out the cleanest route. I use my prophecy spell to figure out like the path of least resistance to just get straight and break into that room to destroy the thing that we're supposed to destroy. And I do it. I put up the rally flag, start to get overwhelmed. I let them retreat, and then I come back to that same place with the rally flag, and my units just go whatever direction they feel like. And there's like 4 or 5 main roads that lead up, and my forces are split between all those different roads, even though I put the rally flag in the same place. And they're like trying to break down new doors that lead to like even more enemies spawning, and I just panicked. And at that point, there was nothing I could do because they like engaged in combat, and I managed to barely scrape by. Because I don't mean to spoil the ending, but you know, you break down the door and the level just kind of ends. But if I had actually had to follow through and break that thing, I don't know that I would have been able to. And it was really frustrating that my the AI of my workers, they just seemed to kind of go. I mean, I guess technically they were heading the direction I wanted them to go, but they were not taking a path that made any kind of sense. They were going like out and around instead of just sort of straight, which was very odd.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess they're programmed to take the path that like is the shortest, is what I would assume. What I've had to do before is like click at shorter distances to make sure that they don't end up, dividing, because they will do that sometimes. And the safest thing is to click, remove, click, remove, click, remove.
Yeah, I'll be doing that moving forward.
Along.
Okay. So one of the important things that's mentioned, I said this earlier about Mendicos. So he is the narrator that's been helping us out. And he has a very interesting dialogue in this chapter. So we hear a strange female voice talking to us. And then it says it's Kira. And she's making snide comments about Mendicos and about him, how they're never going to be able to take this... take the empire and take them down, because Kira, as mentioned previously, is the goddess of this realm. And so she and Mendicos have a conversation back and forth, basically telling each other that they won't be able to stop each other. And it's nice to see that interaction, because it really brings the world to life. Or it's mentioned previously about this goddess, but she's never shown up, she's never mentioned anything, but now we know that she's taking an active involvement in the defense of this realm. And so who knows how much of a interference she'll be in the future. So that's a nice factor for this chapter. And then another is our comrade who has been defeated. We're defending him. Every now and again he will make comments about how he has been defeated, or some other regards to that, and he'll make mentions. And anytime he makes any mentions of stuff like that, or any comments, Mendicos makes sure to mention that he's just speaking gibberish and to just ignore it. So I
thought that was really funny. He's like, all is lost. We should do something. Like, quiet your blubbering.
Yep, Mendicos is not having it.
Mendicos is, I enjoy his kind of like snide comments throughout the whole game. I know there's like in the 3rd chapter where I discussed it being like a tower defense. The Lord is like, we shall attack from the north, south, and center. And he's like, this babbling idiot. And at one point he's like, he should have been flogged as a child. And I enjoy hearing all of his comments regarding other characters in the game.
Mm-hmm. It's just a beautiful little extra touch that they added in, just to make him all snarky, I guess is the word, and just condescending to the other people, and just how beneath him they are. There we go.
A true lord of evil.
Right, exactly. So, anyone else have any information they want to cover on chapter 7?
was just gonna say, as far as the narrative goes, I was most interested in like Raskos's position. Because obviously the
Hmm.
goddess is gonna be like, darkness cannot defeat me. That's what she
Hmm.
sounds like, by the way.
Yeah.
And then your narrator is just gonna be an evil jerk because he's been an evil jerk the whole time. So, uh, what what Raskos was saying. No, I'm not exactly compelled by the narrative. I'm just kind of going objective, and
Hmm.
then invested in the mechanics of the game. But I mean, I'm interested to see what happens. I'm interested to see if there's any kind of narrative payoff, or if it really is just sort of, flavor, so to teach you how to play the game.
Hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see
Similar.
what route they take for sure.
Hmm?
So, chapter 7, we finish up. We take out their item they've been trying to use to kill off our Underlord friend.
Do we
And-
take it out? I thought we got overwhelmed and we're like kicked out, and we lost.
Oh, maybe I forgot the ending.
I thought I took it out. Maybe you lost.
I thought I did.
Maybe it's so I beat down the door, and a cutscene happens. Like it zooms in at the end, and it's like the goddess is like, "You'll never be able to defeat us," blah blah blah, and then the narrator, whose name I will never learn, um, I don't remember exactly what he says, but he basically says it's time to bail, and then we just leave.
I
mean,
think you
honestly
win,
don't
but
remember.
it's a
Use of a
trap.
rare
I'm pretty sure that
artifact
like
with
you
limited-
destroyed her like gate or whatever it is, but she was like, haha, that was actually a like something I've planted here. Like I've been like luring you to this location for a trap. Is what I
Gotcha. Okay.
understood it as. And she's now going to try to get you on the run or whatever. I don't know.
So, I did a fact check, and we do get into the room successfully. We are trying to destroy the device, and then we're told that the holy power is just too much for us to challenge, and we do end up leaving and returning to Kairos. So, yeah.
Raskos is just dead.
Yes,
DED.
so his realm is completely destroyed. And
Rest in peace.
And then our wonderful narrator says that he's disappointed him while his realm's being destroyed. To add
Yeah, I
insult
don't
to
think I
injury.
got that part.
Did your game crash? Is that why you
Yeah,
didn't get that
yeah,
part?
my
Oh,
game
okay.
crashed. So that's what. I mean, I'm getting like parts of it. And I'm just like, I'm just going to the next area. I'm hoping there's
You
nothing.
should
in between.
probably
Yeah.
you should probably just try to find the cutscenes online
So
somewhere.
honestly, I didn't get that far when I was writing my notes, so I misspoke on that. But so that
You're good.
cutscene ends with 4 of their version of the acolytes surrounding the holy device, and then it shoots up into the sky, and then it shows Raskos's realm there, and then it just crumbles into pieces, and then our wonderful leader says, "You disappoint me," and then it ends.
Yeah, didn't
That's
get that.
the end of the game.
It
half
was
the
a,
game.
It was a pretty good game.
So,
So
any final comments?
so I've enjoyed it so far. I'm really excited to go and play the second half. I'm liking this enough that after I finish it, I'll probably play this one more. I know I'm kind of jumping the gun, but I'm enjoying the mechanics enough. I think I'll probably play the sandbox mode because I am enjoying this at the moment. This is my type of game. I love strategy games. RTSs are something I've been playing for
Mm-hmm.
like 17-ish years and nearly 20 years now. So I'm excited to keep playing it.
I will also jump the gun, but in the complete opposite direction of Ryder, and say that while I am like enjoying aspects of this game, and I'm curious to see like how the second half plays out, and I hope that I'll end up really liking it. This was not a game that I had like decided that I was going to play through. If it's something I was doing casually on my own time, I probably would not have gotten this far, frankly. But I'm going to stick it out. I'm optimistic to see what happens. Again, it's probably just not my genre. It's probably not the best introduction to this genre for me. Because
I think you would have been better off playing like Age of Empires because that's just like the core that like I think anyone can play and enjoy.
Mhm.
But this is like mechanically like far and beyond.
Yeah,
any,
it's
like,
very-
introductory stuff.
It's very dense and overwhelming, and I'm frustrated and confused more than I am like enjoying myself, which is problematic, I suppose. But yeah, I'm interested to see how it works out.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I guess I'll wrap it up here and give you my final thoughts. I had played this game previously for the first few chapters and tried it out, and then, life gets in the way. But it was nice to redo those first few chapters and really get a grasp of what was going on and pay more attention to the story, since I didn't have to get in and try to understand all of that at once. I could, I already had an idea of how the game worked, and so I got to focus more on the story for the beginning part. And then also that learning curve, as you get to the more difficult levels, was fun to enjoy. And just getting ready to finish up those last 6 chapters of this main campaign. Just excited to see what road this campaign is going to take, if we ever figure out about our strange leader and his motives, what he might do to us once we actually complete his objectives he's given us. What path has he got set for us after this? So it's going to be an exciting time, and we'll hope you'll join us all for the second part of this wonderful adventure of War for the Overworld. And thank you all for joining us.